those of you who are just joining us tonight, hello, my name is Jessica Silver. I'm Assistant Comptroller for Public Affairs for Comptroller Scott Stringer. And we're really thrilled that you could all join us tonight for this workshop on workers' rights and economic justice and about the work our office does around prevailing wage advocacy. We're going to be joined in just a moment by New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer, so we're going to wait until he joins us. Then he's going to give a few brief remarks before we get underway. And I'm here with William Harmon from our Bureau of Labor Law, who's going to be leading us through tonight's presentation when we get started.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for coming.
And for anyone who's not familiar with the format, all of your microphones and cameras are off, but you're welcome to submit questions at any time tonight using the chat box feature. And after the presentation, we will get to as many questions as we can. Okay, I'm being told by an attendee that my voice is echoing. Is anyone else having that problem?
I am not having that problem.
You can hear me fine? Okay.
I can hear you fine, yes.
Great. Okay, thanks everyone in the chat box. And again, for those of you who have just joined us, I'm Jessica Silver from Comptroller Scott Stringer's office. The Comptroller will be joining us in just one moment for this prevailing wage presentation, and then we'll get started. So thank you for your patience. Okay, thanks again, guys. So sorry to keep you waiting. Another minute and we'll get going. We apologize for the delay, but we're so glad you could be with us tonight. And hope wherever you are, whatever you're doing, everyone is having a great evening. Rebecca, sorry, we don't have closed captions set up for this evening, but we'll for sure do that next time. That was an oversight, and thank you for flagging it.
Rebecca, also, if you have any questions afterwards, my contact information is available, so you can definitely reach out to me directly if there's something that you might have missed.
Okay, well, you know what? I hate to keep everyone waiting. So I think we're going to get started with the presentation. And Comptroller Stringer does want to join us shortly and say a few words, but I think we'll just take a break when he joins so we don't keep you all waiting. So oh, hold on. I'm actually being told he's joining in 15 seconds, so scratch that. We will not be getting started. Give us one moment. It's the wonderful world of Zoom and all the technical difficulties that go along with it. If we don't get him in just another minute, I promise you we will get going. Oh, and it looks like he is joining us. So we will get going in just one moment. Comptroller Stringer, can you hear me? We just need you to turn on your video and microphone. Okay, well, the good news is a few more of you have been able to join us while we wait. So thank you again for joining. Oh, okay. Hello, Comptroller Stringer.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. We've now been joined by New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer, who's here to speak to us all before we get into the prevailing wage presentation, which, again, we're really thrilled to be able to share with you all in honor of Labor Rights Week. And without delay, I want to introduce to you New York City Comptroller Scott M. Stringer.
Well, Jessica, thank you very much. And I am really glad to have everybody on tonight, our Prevailing Wage Workshop. This workshop is in honor of Labor Rights Week. But before I just make some remarks, I really want to thank three individuals who have played such a key role in making sure people understand prevailing wage, enforcing prevailing wage, and returning money when we have prevailing wage violations. I want to thank our Deputy Controller, Dean Kokoris. I want to thank Josiel Estrella, who, quite frankly, without her, so much of the awareness of our office and the work that we do would not be in the public domain, and we could never have given back millions of dollars without her help. And I just want to say thank you. I also want to thank Will Giron, who has just been top-notch organizer in everything he does. He's an organizer at heart, and in this role, he is doing incredible outreach. So Dean, Josiel, and Will, I want to say thank you. I also want to say that I believe that workers are their own best advocates when they know their rights, which is why community-based partnerships are so important. And I want everyone to know that my office is committed to enforcing prevailing wages and connecting workers with the pay they are rightfully owed. And we're backing up our words with concrete action. We launched a phone banking campaign in April to make sure workers get the prevailing wages they are owed for their work with the city, because in these difficult times, every dollar counts. I don't have to tell all of you that the economic fallout of COVID-19 has made our work even more important.
Okay, I think we have lost the comptroller. I think he's frozen. Comptroller Stringer, can you hear us? Okay, unfortunately, we might be having a technical issue, so I'm so sorry about that. I think we'll just hop right into the presentation, and hopefully the comptroller can get back on shortly.
Absolutely. And when he does, I will, of course, give him the floor.
Okay, wonderful. Then this is what I'm going to do, everyone. I'm going to share my screen so we can get going with the presentation. Just one moment.
Great.
All right. So I hope the comptroller will be able to come back and join us. But until then, I am just going to turn the floor right over to Will Giron, who's our Deputy Outreach Director in the Bureau of Labor Law, who's going to walk us through this evening's presentation. So Will, please take it away.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. First, I just want to thank everyone for coming here today. And of course, I want to thank Comptroller Stringer as well for really just really amplifying the work that we're doing here at the Bureau of Labor Law. Again, my name is William Hiron. I am the Deputy Director of Outreach for the Bureau of Labor Law. And I just want to welcome everyone and thank everyone for coming here today. Really, we started this workshop because we saw an increase in stolen wage cases, especially amongst the immigrant community. And we actually see that a lot of folks, they actually don't know or they're not really familiar with what prevailing wage is. And many workers don't even know that they are entitled to prevailing wage. Some don't even know that they have back wages owed to them. And really what we had originally done was we started this with different nonprofit organizations, right? We held a workshop, and then from there, we kind of continued having these workshops. And really, they've proven to be quite successful. They've proven to be very, very informative. And so now we're having another one here in honor of Labor Rights Week. And really, my commitment to you is that we are going to, keep this, we're going to keep this very concise. And we're also going to make sure that you have all the information you need. And we're going to have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. And so basically, this is our agenda right here. As many of you saw, we're going to talk about what prevailing wage is, step-by-step guide to accessing our resources, workers' rights, etc. And we'll take it from there. So why don't we go to the next slide? What exactly is prevailing wage? Obviously, that sounds like a very technical term. It sounds like a very legal term. But really, what we're going to find out in this workshop is that this isn't just an issue of workers' rights and economic justice, but really it's something that's transformative for folks. And I think over here, we're going to highlight how. So number one, prevailing wage is the wage and benefit rate set annually by our agency, the New York City Comptroller's Office, for every trade or occupation for employers performing public works projects and building service work on New York City government-funded sites. And I'll clarify a little bit what public works projects means. But just to give you an example, right? Minimum wage here in New York State, $15 an hour, right? This is set by the state legislature as opposed to the prevailing wage rate, which is what we set, right? And we as the New York City Comptroller's Office, we have a legal mandate to set this, right? Like we are the ones that are responsible for this. And we took over here the prevailing wage rate for a commercial building carpenter, right? We set prevailing wage for each occupation. And really, it comes out to $54 an hour in terms of wages, right? In addition to that, folks under this title of commercial building contractor, they should be getting the supplemental benefit rate of $46.88 an hour. In other words, the value of their supplement should be equal to that $46.88. And of course, contractors do have the option of paying that money to wages rather than supplements, rather than as benefits. But that's another conversation. But yeah, and again, right, just to emphasize, right, how transformative this is, right? Again, a lot of folks, they don't know that they're entitled to prevailing wages. They don't even know that they're owed prevailing wages, right? So an example that I like to use is we had one individual who, shortly before COVID, he actually moved out to California, right? And, as part of our job as outreach, right, we go looking for these workers who are owed prevailing wage. We located him in California, and he wasn't in a good position. He was actually, he was homeless at that time, a lot of struggles going on. And he was owed $7,000, over $7,000 in unpaid prevailing wages. We located him. We were able to get him back that money. Now he has his own apartment. He has a new job right now. And from last I spoke to him, I actually spoke to him recently, he's actually going to be going back to school. I had another individual, right, who we found there, who we also, located them. They were owed prevailing wages, a couple of $100s, so a little bit more modest. But that individual said to me, man, this is incredible, right? I'm going to use this money actually to buy school supplies for my daughter, right? And then I'm going to use some of this money as well to buy textbooks for my other daughter who's just starting high school, who's just starting college, I mean to say. So really, right, like he said, this money isn't for me, this is for my daughters, right? So you can see how transformational this is. You can see how important this is. And really, right, like when you see these, when you see how much workers are potentially not being paid, it really does become an issue of workers' rights and economic justice. So the next slide. Who qualifies for prevailing wage, right? What are these public work sites that I'm talking about? Simply put, construction work on New York City public projects, right? So for example, if you look at the street construction that goes on, right? Maybe sometimes you see, for example, utility companies, right? Like doing construction work outside. Any construction work that's being done on streets, for example, these would be entitled to prevailing wage, right? Building services on city government contracts and at certain buildings receiving the 421A tax exemption. By building services, we mean, for example, security personnel. We mean janitorial staff, facility staff, maintenance staff, right? These are the folks that would qualify for prevailing wage. And especially if they work in buildings that qualify for the 421A tax benefit. In other words, certain developers are receiving tax breaks for so-called affordable housing. If they work there, they would also be entitled to prevailing wage. And then last but not least, food services and temporary office services on government contracts also qualifies for prevailing wage. So just as we are responsible for setting prevailing wage, we are also responsible for enforcing prevailing wage. And that means that our agency has the legal mandate to go after unscrupulous contractors and any sort of employers that are not paying prevailing wage. We have the legal authority to do that. We take them to court. And as part of that, right, they need to settle with us, right, and give us back all of those wages that they did not pay. A couple of things to keep in mind. We do not disclose the identities of complaining workers. And as a matter of fact, later on in the presentation, I'm going to show you in the complaint form where you can actually mark that off, right? So we don't, we don't give out that information, right? Workers are entitled to unpaid prevailing wages regardless of immigration status. Very, very important to note. We have a lot of immigrant workers that come to us, And regardless of your immigration status, you are entitled to prevailing wage. If you work here, you are entitled to those wages. And then last but not least, our agency may continue with a compliance case, even if a worker has directly settled with an employer or has signed a release. That's a little bit more technical, and we have, attorneys that can help with that. But long story short, if a worker has settled directly or signed a release, but we find that, that is insufficient, we will continue to pursue that case. And then now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you guys our website. Our website is, I'm going to be sharing my screen here. Just give me 1 second. Our website is really cool because it's really straightforward and really easy to navigate. And it was really designed like that for folks to, so Jess, if you could just enable a screen share for me.
Mikey. I'm going to
Mikey. There we go. Thanks, Mike. So there we go. All right. I hope everyone can see that. Jess?
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. So, all right, folks. So again, now we're going to go to our website, which is where you can actually access our resources. And it's pretty straightforward. So again, over here, comptroller.nyc.gov, right? We're going to scroll down to where it says top services, which you see over here, just a couple of clicks below. And then you see the little figure with the hard hat over here, right? Once you see the figure with the hard hat, just know that that's labor law, right? That's our stuff. That's prevailing wage. So third icon from the right, we're going to click on that. Oops. There we go. And all right, so here we are. We're in our page where you can access all our labor resources. So over here, this is just the definition of prevailing wage. Talks a little bit about like the legal precedent for why we are responsible for enforcing prevailing wage. And over here on this section, you're going to see over here, it says prevailing wage schedules. That's just a fancy way of saying this is a list of occupations with their respective wage rates that they should be getting paid. So it'll literally be in the exact same format that I showed you in the previous slide with the wage rate and the supplemental benefit rate. And you can just find that based on occupation and profession. A very straightforward document. We don't need to go through that. I recommend though hitting the search function because we have a lot of job occupations there. Next, we're going to go to the workers' rights page. As a matter of fact, actually, no, let's do this. So over here, we're on the workers' rights page, and this is over here where you can access some of the information, right? So over here, we have know your rights information and handouts available for construction work. We also have it available for building service work. We have it available also for homeless and daycare services. I'm going to scroll up a little bit real quick just to show you guys a couple of things. Remember when I had mentioned that if you worked in a 421A building, you qualify for prevailing wage? Over here, we actually have a list of covered buildings, right? These are all 421A buildings according to alphabetical order street name, and also according to a borough. We don't need to go through this whole entire list, but again, look for your building here. If you're in a 421A building, or if you don't even know, find out over here. If you see your building here, you qualify for prevailing wage. And again, we have it available in different languages, our Know Your Rights material. If you don't find your language, reach out to us. We have a lot of folks who speak all types of, various languages. Also for the 421A over here, we also have it for 6130 buildings. Again, same format. You can click on that. Now I'm going to scroll back up to the top, and I'm going to actually show you all our complaint form. One quick thing, again, our complaint form is very, very straightforward. We don't need to go through the entirety of it. What I want to highlight, though, for you all is over here, right? Are you presently employed by the above contractor? Yes or no? If yes, would you prefer your identity to remain confidential? You can mark that off right over there. Again, very straightforward. And of course, we're not going to reveal your information, right? So again, I'm going to close this. Again, a very straightforward form. If you have any questions, of course, you could reach out to us.
Yeah, and Will, I'm just going to pause for a minute because there's a few people who are trying to raise their hands. I just want to clarify, we can't call on you live. This Zoom session isn't configured that way. So if you have a question, type it into the chat box and I'll read it out for you. But we don't have the ability to take you off mic to ask questions.
And I promise everyone, this is we're almost finished with the presentation, so we'll have plenty of time for questions. But back to the presentation. There are two ways, right, that workers can, that we retrieve lost wages to workers, right? One way is that a worker comes in, they say, hey, I think my wages are being stolen. No problem. Here is the complaint form, right? And this is the complaint form right here that I showed you. Now, the other way that we retrieve workers their unclaimed wages is through this really, really cool page, right? Please, everyone focus on this because this is actually really awesome. This is our Unclaimed NYC wage awards page, right? So as I had mentioned, our agency is also responsible for enforcing prevailing wage. And we go after contractors who are not paying those prevailing wage. And we actually have the authority to debar those contractors, right? Usually though, contractors will be like, okay, we made a mistake, let's settle. And there's two things that they have to do as part of that settlement agreement, right? Two main things, that is. Number one, they have to give us a list of all the names of the workers who are owed prevailing wage. And number two, they have to return all that money to us. So we hold on to it. And now we're going to go out there and look for those workers, right? The list, those names, you can actually find right here on this list. How do I know if I am owed money, right? You can find a list of the workers that are owed prevailing wage right here on this page. And as a matter of fact, what I highly encourage everybody to do is really type your name in here, search your name over here, right? Check it out, right? See if your name comes up. If your name comes up, or if the name of one of your family members or colleagues or members comes up, scroll down here, file a proof of claim. Again, another very straightforward form with very straightforward questions. It says that, you have to get it notarized and that you have to send it to our office. We're actually waiving those requirements right now because of COVID. So, you could just, take a photo of it, take a screenshot of it, email it to me, and we'll get your claim started. So again, folks, just the Unclaimed NYC wage awards. This is a list of all the workers that are owed prevailing wages. I actually did a workshop where one individual said, she was like, oh, hey, I typed my name in there 2 years ago and my name came up. I was owed prevailing wage. I didn't even know. So again, right, like really spread this information, right? Really share this information and type in your name, your family member's name, etc. And now before we wrap up, I'm going to show you guys Checkbook NYC, checkbooknyc.com. A really great initiative that Comptroller Stringer is promoting in order to really promote transparency in government so that you can know where your taxpayer dollars are going to. But for our particular purposes, right, we're going to use it to find a potential employer. So for example, let's say you yourself, right? Hey, I don't know if I'm owed prevailing wages. How do I find out? Or if you have somebody that comes in and says, hey, how do I find out if I'm owed prevailing wages, right? Well, this is one little technique that you could use that if your employer comes up on this website, it's a red flag, right? get in touch with us. We'll take a look at it. Again, it's not to say that if your employer comes up, oh, hey, you're automatically owed prevailing wage. No, it's more of a red flag. So just to give you an example, right? Hey, how do I know if I'm owed prevailing wage? Well, no problem. Let's go to checkbooknyc.com, and I'm going to type the name of my employer, right? In this case, we're going to use Temco, right? So let's say you, a family member or whoever, right? They say, well, I work for Temco, right? No problem. Checkbook NYC. We're going to type in Temco over here on the search bar. We're going to click on it. And if Temco comes up, or if your employer comes up, whoever your employer is, that should be a red flag for you. I should take a look into this. Let's get in touch with the comptroller's office to see if I may be owed prevailing wage. And the reason is because many contractors, right, like if they're receiving city contracts, that information is going to appear over here. And, if you're receiving a city contract, depending on the work that you do, again, totally depends, you should be paying your workers prevailing wage. So that's a little technique that we like to use. And that's basically it. That's the presentation. Again, very straightforward. I'm going to stop sharing right now, actually. And we're going to open up the floor for questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Will. That was really helpful. And we have a couple questions coming in, and we also have some questions that were submitted ahead of time. Awesome. So I'm gonna go back and forth, but a couple great questions just came in. So I'm gonna start there in the chat box. The first question is there a time limit on being able to retrieve the wages? There
absolutely is. So we usually, so here's the thing, right? Whenever wages are not retrieved, right? We in turn have to send that to the city treasury, right? So the treasury now has it. And usually we give 6 to 7 years to do that, right? Actually, prior to COVID, we were actually starting an outreach initiative where, we put out the information on newspapers, we sent out mailers, we were doing phone banking, et cetera, right? And really trying to find these workers. But really, 6 to 7 years is usually the amount before we have to return it to the city treasury.
Okay, thank you. We have another question that's asking about the types of professions besides carpenters and construction workers that could potentially be eligible for prevailing wage. Could you give a bit more of description of some of the kinds of professions that could get prevailing wage?
Absolutely. So, just to clarify a little bit more, right? So on the last slide, for example, you saw that, it also mentioned building services work, right? Not just construction, right? So what does building service work include, right? Security personnel, facilities, right? Janitorial staff, maintenance staff, right? Those sorts of folks would qualify for prevailing wage, right? A lot of individuals who, for example, they may find their job either through some sort of employment agent, some sort of employment services, et cetera, right? Some sort of staffing services, they would qualify for prevailing wage. So over here, what some of the examples that we use, right, where building staff, right, maintenance, janitorial, security, et cetera. We also talked about, for example, certain food personnel, right? Certain personnel that's working in food. Those are the type of folks that would qualify for prevailing wage, right? In other words, if like a good giveaway, if you work in a municipal building, right, and you're doing sort of like, that type of work, right, you'd probably be entitled to prevailing wage.
Okay, so the same questioner is following up and saying, what about doctors, lawyers, professors? So my understanding is doctors, lawyers, and professors usually are not working on city contracts that are covered by prevailing wage, but could you clarify that?
You are correct with that. I am not aware of any other way that those professions would be getting paid, but they are usually not working as part of the sector.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to ask a few questions that were submitted with the RSVPs. First, you talked about this a little bit, but maybe you could give some more detail. How can you tell if you're entitled to prevailing wage on your current job?
So
what's
again,
the best way?
Absolutely. So again, right, there's a couple of ways, right, to figure it out, right? Obviously, one of the things that we said, right, we listed some professions, right? We listed some examples of how, you would know. And again, right, like we also use like the little technique that I showed you with Checkbook NYC, oftentimes folks, they may not know, right? Most of the folks that actually we work with and stuff like that, they just find out like, whoa, I'm entitled to prevailing wage. How is that even possible, right? Recently, I was working with somebody who, as I had mentioned, right, they had came to their prevailing wage job through some sort of employment sort of company, employment contractor, and they didn't even know. It wasn't explained to them, right? So a good thing that folks should do, right, aside from what we reviewed here on the on both the website and also on the slides, I really, really recommend that you check out Checkbook NYC, checkbooknyc.com. If you check that out and if you type your employer's name in there and your employer appears, that's a red flag. Definitely get in touch with us, right? So again, if you're just not sure, go to Checkbook NYC, type in the name of your employer in the search bar. If your employer doesn't appear, it's most likely you may not be owed prevailing wage. Regardless, you could still get in touch with us and file a complaint form. If we ourselves cannot help you out, we can connect you to other resources and our colleagues in other agencies that can help you out.
And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to put up your contact information so everyone has it and will be able to get in touch with you if they would like to. Another question just came in, a great question, I think. Are there protections from employer retaliation? If you have not been paid prevailing wage, I assume this is where the question's going, and then you filed to try to get it. Is there any protection for you?
Is there any protection? And, maybe, Dean, you want to chime in here a little bit, right? So there are protections against retaliation. That's for sure. Specific, I believe, which agency would deal with it? DOL would probably deal with retaliation specifically.
It's the Attorney General.
The Attorney General.
DOL. We don't have that mandate. So there are protections. Actually, believe it or not under the prevailing wage laws, not under the state labor laws. It's under a different part of the labor law. So, we would, when we handle a case, so retaliation means someone's filed a complaint with us. And because they filed a complaint and their employer found out about it, they lost their job. We would refer that. Very often, those are cases we step up in enforcement, and we then work with prosecutors' offices like the district attorney's offices or the attorney general, and we prosecute those employers. Or we can just turn the retaliation matter over to the prosecutor's office. The attorney general can do the enforcement. I also want to clarify something, Will. I think that James Macon asked a question earlier about how far we can go back. I think you were more talking about how long we can. You were talking about the unclaimed funds.
Oh, yeah, I'm talking about unclaimed funds.
I think James might have been asking about how far can we go back when an employee complains about unpaid wages. And in most cases, that's just 2 years. We can only go back 2 years from the date that we received the complaint or the date we opened the case. And that's based, for the construction and building service prevailing wages.
Thank you. And thank you. Dean Kokoris is our Assistant Comptroller for Labor Law. So thank you for joining us in this Zoom as well this evening. I have a couple more questions that have been submitted. Okay, what if I want to file a complaint against my current employer, but I don't want the employer to know? So I guess this is speaking to the issue that you were just on.
So kind of like I had mentioned earlier in the presentation, again, we don't you guys don't come in and we're like, oh, hey, contractor, guess who came into our office complaining? We don't do nothing like that, right? And so that's why, what, no, I'm not going to share screen, forget. So if you go back to our complaint form, right? I highlighted a little section where you can, where it literally asks, do you want your name to remain private, right? You can just mark yes, and your name will be kept private. We won't reveal your information. We won't reveal your immigration status, nothing like that, right? As a matter of fact, the question is, are you currently employed with this employer? And would you like us to keep your name confidential? I think those were the two exact questions, right? So that's one of the first questions that we ask in that form. So, just bear in mind, we will keep your information confidential. And of course, our team of attorneys, if we ever have to go to trial or anything like that, they will advise you. But again, to answer the question, no, we do not reveal that information, and you can actually mark that on the complaint form.
Right. And let me elaborate a little, Will. So that actually the previous question, that's also, I think, our best defense against retaliation, because you talk to most workers, they would much rather avoid being identified and avoid losing their jobs than being fired because they complained and having a lawsuit against their employer for retaliation. As everybody knows, lawsuits are are not easy, and you can wait a long time to see any money. So that's really, we try to take preventive measures. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So we do not reveal the identities of complaining workers, and we handle our cases in such a way that, we always ask for the entire payroll. So we're not going to single anybody out. And what Will was mentioning about going to trial, by law, the contractor, if they don't want to settle with us, if they want to go to trial, they have the right to cross-examine whoever's a witness against them, and they have the right to see those complaint forms. So what Will means by that is, if it gets to the point where we have a really recalcitrant, a really stubborn employer who won't settle and they want to go to trial and the worker really doesn't want to be identified, we would then stop the case there. And at the worker's option, we would not take the chance that they would have to be disclosed to the employer rather than go to trial.
Thank you. And a few people throughout the evening have asked in the chat box if they can get this presentation. What we can do is we can send an email to everyone who RSVP'd tonight, everyone who we have an email address for, and we can share the link to our website and other key resources and our contact information so you have everything in one place.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, in the presentation, I have the links to our website, right, for our labor law page, and I also have the links for Checkbook NYC. And of course, feel free to get in touch with us with any other questions.
Thank you. And I have another question for you. What is the difference between prevailing wage and living wage?
That's a very, very good question. So again, right, prevailing wage, as we explained, is a wage rate that the New York City Comptroller, that our agency sets, the New York City Comptroller's office sets for public works projects, right? Totally separate. Living wage now is the wage rate that's it's kind of like a what's a good way to describe this? It's kind of like the minimum that an employer needs to pay their employees. Dean, maybe there's a more technical definition of it.
No, it's a good explanation. I just want to point out that on our website, we have definitions of living wage and we have living wage schedules. Now, Will just skipped them in his presentation, and it's not because he forgot. It's because, practically speaking, the living wage is now less than the minimum wage, which is kind of backwards. When the living wage was initially passed, the minimum wage was down around $7 and change an hour. The living wage is supposed to be what it sounds like. It's supposed to be something higher than the minimum wage that people can support themselves and a family on. So currently, it's like Will says, the prevailing wage is something that we set every year, and it's a different wage and benefit for each occupation. The living wage is set by the legislature. It's set by law, and it's just one wage that everybody makes across the board. And that wage is now somewhere around $12 an hour. So obviously, the state minimum wage in New York City is $15 an hour. So that's why we don't really focus on that. And if someone came to us and complained and said, I'm not making living wage, we wouldn't do the case. We'd refer them to the State Department of Labor and say, collect your minimum wage. You'd be getting more money that way.
Like a lot of home care workers, for example, right, or like daycare workers, right, Dean, would be making like living wage, right? That would apply to like home care aides, right, daycare workers, things like that.
Right. There's the basic categories. If it's a city contract, it would be home attendants. It would be people who work with persons with cerebral palsy. There's daycare workers and Head Start workers. That living wage actually is even less. It's $10 and $1.50 health benefit. So that's $11.50 an hour, even less. The other living wage would be for cities' financially assisted businesses, and that's in the list that Will showed you on the website. It's under 6-130 and 6-134. You go to that, you click on that link on our website, it takes you to the mayor's office website, and that lists a bunch of businesses and real estate developments where you would be making the living wage. That living wage is a little higher. It's got a cost of living increase. That's the one that's around $12 an hour.
Okay. And I don't think you've answered this before, but forgive me if you have. There was a question about specifically how we calculate prevailing wage.
For the most part, so there's I want to make two separate general category distinctions. And there was another question about, whether professionals make prevailing wage. Prevailing wage, for the most part, is either construction work, which is what most people would call it, construction, alteration, renovation of buildings, heavy construction, streets, parks, public, obviously city streets, public parks, public schools. And then there's building services, which, as Will said, that's janitors, security guards, door persons. That's basically all that's covered. And it's either got to be under city contract with public money, or it's going to be 421A, which is landlords are getting a property tax exemption for a number of years. I kind of took that detour, Jessica. I'm sorry. What was the question initially?
It was just how it's calculated, how prevailing wage is actually arrived at.
So basically, in the construction trades, you look at the private sector that are equivalent construction projects in the private sector, and bearing in mind, city construction projects aren't things like a single family house, right? You're talking about construction of large buildings, office buildings, hospitals, schools, bridges, subway tunnels. So you look in the private sector, and most of that construction work is being done by union companies. So we usually select the union rate. You have major industry trade associations that have master collective bargaining agreements that are the same rates for all union workers, and those are basically our construction prevailing wage rates, and that's by law. The law tells us to really look at those because we don't have the resources to go out and do a survey of every worker working in the public sector. For building service, it's the same. You have one big union that has a lot of members. It's Service Employees International Union. But for building services outside of those main occupations of like cleaner or a door person or security guard, we also use rates that are established by survey by the State Department of Labor and the U.S. Department of Labor that are average rates.
Okay, thank you. We have another question about whether our office goes out and proactively does outreach on prevailing wage job sites, or whether we, simply it's complaint driven and we respond to complaints that come in. So could you speak a little bit to the types of outreach we do? And I know outreach has changed in the time of COVID. So maybe you could speak a little bit to what we traditionally have done and how we've adapted our outreach to this sort of remote way of working.
Absolutely. And yeah, when, by the way, and just to also add and clarify, right, when somebody complains, right, when somebody submits a complaint form, right, it doesn't just end there, right? Usually we'll talk to other workers, right, who work for the same company, right? Because we see that it's not just a specific problem, it's really endemic, right? So we interview other workers, right? We outreach to other workers, right? We actually do go to job sites, right? We've gone to job sites where the contractors have been very, very hostile towards us, right? And even for just little things, right? Like making sure that a poster is up, right? Indicating that the workers are owed prevailing wage. So we actually do a lot of proactive outreach. In particular now, right, since the start of COVID, as you saw in the unclaimed funds list, right, we've really been making a concerted effort to locate all those individuals. And really since the start of the pandemic, right, we've done a letter campaign where we've literally sent letters to folks who are on our unclaimed funds list. We've done phone banking. We've done all sorts of targeted outreach like that, right? So really we're doing some serious community organizing out here, right, and getting that information out. We go to different organizations, right, especially organizations that work with workers, right, immigrant workers, right? We do outreach to them and we get referrals from them, right? So, this presentation that you're seeing here, this is not a one-off presentation. It's a presentation we're doing with various organizations, right, who are inviting us to do it. It's a presentation we're doing with workers and with other folks, right? We go to OSHA trainings, right, and we do these presentations before the OSHA trainings, right? We go to the consulates, right? A lot of immigrant workers are in the consulates, right? So we have different approaches to outreach, but it's very much a very engaged and proactive approach. So we haven't really just been waiting for complaints to come in. We're constantly working. We're constantly talking to workers. And obviously, COVID has limited some of that, but in turn, we've adopted pretty well. And one of the big ways is, with our phone banking sort of efforts, with our letter outreach efforts and stuff like that. We've even done text messaging. We've done a whole bunch of stuff. So yeah.
And the thing to remember is, ideally, we it's easiest for us to make a case with a worker complaint like the one Will showed you. If they could fill that out, that's ideal. But we don't need that to move forward. So, if you say complaint driven, we rely on other organizations or stakeholders who have an interest in seeing prevailing wage enforced to get referrals or tips. So we have unions that refer to us.
Oh, absolutely.
Employers underpaying. We have other city agencies that, when they're reviewing work, when they're project managers on site and they have a feeling, because very often we don't have to tell you, workers are afraid to complain. First and foremost, like we discussed, they don't want to be retaliated against, right? They don't want to lose their jobs, especially now. Many people feel very lucky to be working and don't want to risk that.
And a lot of immigrant workers too, actually, right? Especially a lot of immigrant workers, right? Obviously, we're living in a climate where there's a lot of hostility from government officials towards the immigrant community. A lot of immigrant communities are a little hesitant to get in touch with city agencies. Thankfully, though, we work with nonprofit organizations, right? Whether it be organizers, whether it be caseworkers, or whoever the case may be, that they'll refer folks to us, and then we can start building that relationship. But even though we do have kind of like that sort of track of folks coming in complaining, I mean, we also have very proactive outreach efforts, right? We don't just isolate it to one case. We really try to kind of like build that case to see if other workers are also impacted.
Right. And like Will indicated, we have investigators who can go down to job sites. So, but, it helps us if we get a tip that a particular employer, working at a particular location today or this week is underpaying, and we can send people down to talk to employees or to talk to the managers there.
If someone watching tonight wants to help us further this work and they want to be an advocate and help get people, connected to this work, what are some of the things they could do?
Awesome. Jess, glad you asked that question, actually. So as I had mentioned early on, right, like this presentation really came about after we saw the need, right, especially during COVID, for this information to really be put out there, right? And so we did have an initial roundtable with I think it was about like 70 nonprofit organizations. There were representative of nonprofit organizations there. And from there, many of these organizations, they actually said, hey, can you do this presentation for our staff? Can you do it for our members, right? And so we asked really two things, right? Number one, if you are part of an organization, a community group, or if you know a group of workers, right? We are more than happy to come out and do this presentation, right? This presentation usually takes between 15 to 20 minutes, and then we leave time for Q&A. We don't go past an hour, and we can always do it, according to what works best for you and your members and your constituents, right? So whether that be like, noon on a Monday or 12 a.m. or not 12 a.m., but 12 p.m. on a Saturday, or even on a Saturday evening, whatever the case may be, we will come out and we'll do it over Zoom, but we will do these presentations for you. So please, if you are part of an organization, a community group, what have you, and if you found this information helpful and beneficial, please reach out to us, and we will do this presentation for you, right? And my contact information is right here. Just send me an email. We'll get back to you. We've already done about 30 of these presentations, and we have about 20 more to go that we have in the works. So literally in the span of a couple of months, we're going to do almost 50 of these presentations. And please, we want more. We want to be out there. So please reach out to us. We'll do it. We'll do that for you. And number two, in particular, you saw that unclaimed funds, unclaimed wages list with the list of names. Please make sure you share that with, folks within your community, folks within your organization. Share it with your family members, right? Put that link up on your social media pages. Hey, y'all, I've typed my name in here, right, to see if I'm owed unclaimed wages. You guys should do it too, right? Really spread this word, right? Because unfortunately, what we're seeing is that a lot of folks do not, they just don't know. They don't know. And so really, right, like, even if you're not entirely sure if you can organize a group of people for a presentation, at the very least, right, like, send out the link for the unclaimed funds list, right? And of course, we're always available. Email is honestly the best way, right? Because I can respond to you a little bit faster and stuff like that. I'm usually on calls or doing presentations, but definitely send us an email and we can work something out. We can also do this in Spanish as well. We did it today in English. We can definitely do this in Spanish. We often do it in Spanish. And if there are any other language needs, still reach out to us. We'll find a way to make it happen.
So if you need the contact information, I've just put it up. If you're watching on Facebook and you're on your phone, take a screenshot. We're going to email everyone after, but if you didn't RSVP and you're worried about getting the information, it's right here. So please do note it down, or just go to our website, New York City Comptroller, and you can go to the labor law section of the website and find all this information.
Okay.
And I think we are pretty much out of time, and we might be out of questions too. I think we got through all the questions that were asked.
Oh, wow. Nice. And we got a bunch of questions. I love it.